fifth Sunday of Ordinary Time, we hear in our gospel two very familiar images, analogies if you will, that Jesus gives to us for how we are to interact with the world, what we are to be for the world, the salt of the earth and the light for the world. Ultimately, both of these are saying the same thing, but I think it's good for us to be reminded of what that means. First, with the salt of the earth. You know, for us in the modern world, when we hear salt, we very much think of it as a seasoning, as something which makes food taste better, which enriches the flavor of whatever it is that we're putting it in. And of course, that works very well for this analogy, that without salt, food can be bland. It's enriched when our presence is in the world. But I also want to remind you of what salt was actually more important for in the time of Christ, in the ancient world. Salt was used as a preservative. When, especially meats, when foods were packed in salt, it made them last much longer. In other words, it kept them from decay. It kept them from rot. And in this sense, I think we see the full meaning of what we are to be in the world. That which keeps it from decaying, that which keeps it from falling further and further away from the God that created the world and created all of us, and more into the hands of the evil one. I think it's easy for us to see what the decay, if you will, what the rot looks like when it takes hold in our world. Because it often manifests itself first and foremost as a disregard for the sanctity of human life, as a disregard that we are created in the image and likeness of God. This manifests in violence, in war, when human life is disregarded so that the needs of the few, of those in power, are met. Also, it manifests itself in the need in the world, when those who go hungry or without their basic needs, without their basic shelter, with that which human beings require to live a normal and healthy life. Not because these things are too scarce in our world, but almost always, especially in places where this poverty and hunger is the majority, is widespread, almost always because of greed and because of mismanagement, corruption of those who are charged with overseeing governance, with overseeing the protection of people. That is the most obvious example of the decay that we, as the salt of the earth, are meant to preserve against. Of course, in our own culture, in the Western world, where abundance is more common, it finds itself in other ways, typically in the moral decay of our society. When the highest good is upheld as that which feels good, as freedom in its true sense is doing whatever we want, disregarding any tradition of moral sanctity or of what it is we're called to. And again, we can see what that does. The destruction of the family, the cause of so much isolation and misery and anxiety amongst those who give themselves to this culture of decay in which we as the salt are called to preserve against, to guard against, to be the counter of. When he says that we are the light of the world, meaning the same thing, light which scatters the darkness, which overcomes the darkness, we're also given the stronger image that light is meant to shine. It is not meant to be put under a bushel basket. It's not meant to be kept only for ourselves. I know it is the case that at many a time at large our culture would say, it's fine that you're doing what you do on Sundays. If you must cling to your medieval superstitions of religion, go to your churches and do that, but do not bring it into the society. Keep it there. Keep it to yourself once a week. And if that's the cultural milieu that we live in these days, then all the more reason for us, like burning torches, to go into this world and to bring that light, not just here, but anywhere we go, so that others might see it, so that we're never ashamed to declare it and to reveal ourselves as followers of Christ, not so people could see and so that we could show ourselves in a sort of pride of how good we are, but because they desperately need to be reminded that Christ is still here. He is still in this world, even if we are in the so-called post-Christian era. There is still a place of refuge, and that light is still burning. So if that's our call, if that's what we are being reminded of in the gospel, how do we do that? Well, I think it's always best first to look at what the church gives us as the reading to connect to the gospel. What was our first reading about today? How is it that we are the light for the world? First and foremost, it is through our action in the world, through our charity. To share bread with the hungry, as it says, and shelter with those without it. To go in and to feed the poor. To do those works of charity that the church has always done. That has a number of effects. First of all, of course, it upholds the dignity of those that we serve. Everyone we encounter at the Cathedral Soup Kitchen that we ourselves at St. John's support. Anyone that we encounter that is in need, that we are able to help in some way. Immediately and first and foremost, it helps them, it upholds their dignity. I know at times, especially if you do this regularly, it can be difficult or frustrating. There are times where we think, perhaps those we serve, if there was only more they did for themselves to continue to get what they needed, or if our society, if our government was better at helping those who are in mental distress. All these things, which of course we can advocate for. But most immediately, most importantly, meeting people where they are and serving their needs. The other thing that does is it shows our witness to the world at large. I'm convinced that there is perhaps no better way for us to evangelize as a church than simply to show our acts of charity. Again, not for our own pride of how good we are, but so that people can see what truly matters. And all the arguments, all the misconceptions, all of the things that people hurl at the church as attacks, the most difficult argument to overcome for them is when they see our charity. You really cannot argue with that. And it's been that way since the beginning. The other thing that we can do, of course, and I know that the externals are not the most important thing, but they still are important. External manifestations of our faith in the public, in your homes, not to be afraid to display a statue of Mary or a cross or a crucifix or a nativity scene during Christmas time. To say that we in this home believe and are followers of Christ. Not to be afraid to pray in public, to cross yourselves in public, such that this witness is there. This doesn't usually bring much praise, this doesn't usually give us much honor, but that's not the point. The point of it is to remind the world that Christ is still present. Because you never know what a simple encounter, to pray with someone, to pray for someone, to show forth the faith, what sort of encounter that might bring, and how someone desperately searching for that light might find it through you. So on this Sunday, let us be encouraged in this call, and let us never shrink back from what it is that we are asked to do. We come here to be fed and to be enriched, and then we go into the world to proclaim the gospel, to be its salt against decay, and to be the light that defeats the darkness.